All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Meaning Project podcast and the Defiant Spirit podcast. Dr. Dan Franz, Rabbi Baruch Halevi here with you, as always, the dynamic duo of Rabbi B and Dr. D. Today, we're really looking forward to talking about the meaning of work. Anybody out there who has a job or has worked recently knows we were trying to remember if it's called the Great Migration or the Great Resignation or people leaving jobs and moving on and moving into, COVID brought us a lot of work from home and a lot of people losing their jobs. And as we look to come out of that, the meaning of work is pretty important in the field of logotherapy, wouldn't you say, B?
No doubt about it. And I would say that that covers all types of work and at all times in life. And I think that's probably where we're going to end up heading in this conversation, because it's just too easy to think of 9 to 5 and to think of, from 22 till 65 as the window of work. But as you and I both know, there's all kinds of work at all kinds of times.
It's funny to hear that idea of 22 to 65. I was just talking to my financial advisor yesterday, the nice person that takes my money and hopefully puts it somewhere so someday I might be able to retire. But that idea of retirement, I don't know about that anymore. I know there was past generations that worked for a company for a certain amount of time, and at 65, which now I believe is 67, got the shiny gold watch, the pat on the back. They went to work Friday, and Monday they didn't. And after 40 years, they weren't always sure what to do. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't see myself retiring. Maybe toning it down a bit and not working so hard, but there's too much fun in what we do.
I would take it a step further and say you should not retire. Nobody should retire ever. It is a destructive idea. I've done 500 funerals, officiated at 500 funerals, and I would say those that went to retirement ended up as a funeral sooner rather than later.
I
I saw it,
agree.
especially the men. I saw it over and over again. They would work like dogs, then they would retire, then they go to Florida, and then they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. And it was a slow descent towards the end.
And why do you think that is, B?
Because our entire life is a project, is a working of different types at different times. And if you just think of it as 22 to 65, well, at 65, especially in a society that reveres almost workaholic ism, it's all day every day. If then you stop and you shift from fifth gear to first gear, you don't know what to do with yourself. You've never developed any other aspect of yourself, and you feel, I heard it and saw it over and over again, they felt useless.
Mm-hmm.
Once they were masters of their domain and now their phone doesn't ring anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can't shift gears like that in life.
Right. I think that idea of not developing yourself for those 40 years from 22 to 65 is an important one, and having a balance of work and life. I think very often one of the things that sends up red flags for me for people's mental health, regardless of age, is this idea of, well, I'm going to do these things when I retire. If you're 30 or 40 or 50 years old, that's way off well, I'll travel when I retire. Well, what if you don't make it there? And B, why would you wait? There's so many amazing things to do and see in this world. Why would you wait 20 years to do it? There has to be that balance. And you're right. Our society reveres workaholism far too much, and we don't develop those other parts of our personality of our lives.
Do you? I'm just curious about your practice and over the years. Do you have many clients over the age of 65?
I do. Most of them, the greatest examples of the most fulfilled people that I work with are those that have transitioned from work to maybe downgrading a bit, doing some consulting, or volunteer like crazy. My own father's a great example. He retired a couple years ago. He stopped working a full-time job, but that man's more busy now than he ever has been, and enjoying it. He gets to choose his labor now. He gets to choose what he's going to go do.
Yeah.
And finds meaning in it.
Yeah, I've had more and more clients who are older than 60, 65, And the word retirement needs to be retired.
Mm-hmm.
It is a misnomer, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even the word implies tired. It's like, what does that even mean, right? I'm gonna be retired. Like, I call it re-inspired. That's what, because I see these people in re-inspirement, and it's a reimagining,
Mm-hmm.
new rules, new game, their rules, their game. And there's a vitality in a life that can come. So I want to make sure we, kind of contrast that to the alternative of going down to, just wait it out in Florida or wherever it is you retire to. There's an alternative.
Right. That idea of waiting it out. How sad, right? And if we dive into what logotherapy has to say about work, right? Dr. Frankl tells us in the good book we talked about last week, in many of his books, but especially in Doctor and the Soul, he talks about, first of all, he reminds us that every human being is unique in their singularity, right? They are indispensable. And work is an opportunity to show, to cultivate that uniqueness, that singularity, and that indispensability, regardless of what the job is. The way we go about our daily tasks, our work, is our opportunity to discover meaning. And if you do that for 40 some years, if you grow that and cultivate that aspect of yourself, and then you just hit the brakes in retirement, you go to work one day, Friday, and Monday you don't, all of a sudden that part of you will wither, and it will wither quickly. You forget that uniqueness and that singularity. And it can be soul crushing in a way, literally, when we talk about the nous and the noetic part of logotherapy. All of a sudden that part of you withers, and when that withers, that internal, that core, um, physical withering, mental, emotional, right, it all is connected. And that's why we see people when they stop working, when they stop being productive, it's a quick fade.
Yeah, it also feels to me an old model. Like you mentioned it, you get the watch when you're,
Mm-hmm.
retire, and it's the same company, the same grind, but it doesn't work. I don't think it ever worked, honestly, because there's a compartmentalization in that thinking that I go to work and this is who I am, and I come home and this is who I am. And I see people who live like that don't fare well,
Mm-hmm.
because we can't be one type of person in one environment and another type of person in another environment and hold it together. There's no integrity, integral
Mm-hmm.
wholeness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we become, I just reread one of my favorite books, not by Dr. Frankl. I have some other books I like. And it's by Parker Palmer. Have you ever read anything by Parker Palmer?
No.
I think he comes from your neck of the woods, somewhere up near Indiana. He's a Quaker by tradition, but he's an master educator.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his books called Hidden Wholeness. And he talks about the consequences of living a divided life. And we pay a price. And also the people around us pay a price. When I go to work and this is who I am, and I come home and this is who I am, people around us start to pay a price because we are fractured, we are fragmented, and we're not meant to live that way.
Yeah, darn it, B, you got the word right that I was going to use. That's what a sad psychological phenomenon is, that fragmentation of the self, right? You don't get to be truly yourself. You don't get to be your authentic self in either place, because you're maintaining a facade of who you have to be in these two places, and that's taxing, right? That takes energy and focus that you could be spending elsewhere in cultivating that wholeness, that authenticity, that indispensability. So yeah, fragmentation is definitely a strong word for it, and a sad one to experience when you see it.
It's a necessary part of being in a society. You have to. I was just putting together the Enneagram right now and talking a lot about personality, coming from the word persona, which means
Mm-hmm.
mask. And so we have to wear masks. If I'm going in for surgery, I don't want my surgeon to be unmasked, both literally, but also figuratively. I don't want to hear about his problems. I want him to be focused on my problems, right? So he puts on the mask, literally and figuratively, to do his job. But what I experienced, and I was in a very heavily masked profession as a clergy, as rabbi, you go up on the stage, on the bema, on the podium, and you put on the mask, and this is who I am, and then you go home. I see the challenge in that world as you forget you're wearing a mask. Start believing your own bullshit.
Right.
You got to take the mask off, and you've got to take the persona off. And so we have to play the game to some degree, but we also have to get back to this place of authenticity and of our uniqueness and of sharing that and taking the mask off when we get home from work.
I think that's a great idea when we talk about therapists and psychotherapists and helping professionals, right? Some of our education is all about, you have to have that mask, you have to be non-judgmental, and you can't bring any of yourself to therapy. And I've argued that with many a student and intern. No, how can we ask our clients to be truly themselves if we can't bring ourselves to the work that we do? Yes, we should not judge, certainly, but our values play into it, and we might as well own that and recognize it and know that, look, if my values don't align with yours as a client, that's okay. I can help you find somebody else to work with that you agree with better, right? So that I think that goes to any work situation, that you have to be able to be your unique and individual and indispensable self, as we say as Dr. Frankl says.
It's a great point. Let's come back and stay with this therapeutic role, because it's a fine line. I have to wear enough of a persona that it isn't about me. Right. Because you've been, with professionals who don't feel so professional. And it's like, why am I paying you? You should pay me. Right.
There's always that intern that I work with. I'm like, okay, you can stop talking about yourself now. You're here to listen.
But it's about is it a means, right, to help you by me bringing some of myself so that we can further the goals of your growth work. Right. That's the point. And then, but I come back to, but see, I know my job, I know my role, I know my work. So I can do that because this isn't about me. Like if I'm sharing with you in a counseling setting, I'm sharing with you to further your journey because that's my work and what I'm here to do.
Right.
So it's really about knowing your work and again, it could be widgets on the assembly line. Like doesn't have to be a therapeutic relationship.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, right? You and I are very fortunate in what we do, that it's pretty inherent in our roles that we, get to discover meaning. We're engaging in transcendent work of helping other people, right? So there's obviously meaning inherent in our roles, but that doesn't mean other roles out there are meaningless or don't have meaning. As we read in Doctrine of the Soul, the job doesn't matter. It's how you do the job. It's how you approach it. It's the attitude that you bring to it.
Undoubtedly. I knew it was time for me to get out of the clergy profession when I felt myself dialing it in. I was going through the motions. So, people would never think like a clergy position could ever lead to that. There's burnout in every industry, in every field. And when you get to that point, better to go, for me, to go work at Starbucks and feel excited about, learning how to create a new espresso drink and bring my joy than to go through a profession or a job that I just can't feel it anymore.
Right.
So it's not about the profession. It's about the person doing the profession, whatever it is.
Well, and I think that's why we see this, I'm going to refer to it as great resignation. I may be totally off on that. Hopefully one of our listeners will correct me if I am, but I think that's why we see that right now is the pandemic and the quarantine showed us there were different ways to work, and we could find more meaning in some of that work. And that if, again, the job doesn't matter, it's how you do it. But if the environment in which you're doing it does not encourage or support meaning in that way, then it feels pretty darn meaningless, regardless of what attitude you bring to it. You can bring a shiny, happy disposition to it every day, but if the environment is one that is trying to crush that, you can only do that for so long. And so we talk about, when we talk about the individual, work is important. But when we talk about the culture at work, that's equally as important too, and not always within the individual's control.
True. I do believe we can help shape our culture. And then sometimes that's a reason to stay in the job or in the company, right? That you want to be a part of shaping the culture. But you're right. You get to a point where if it's toxic, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to the people around you to bow out, to find a culture and an environment that you can. I do counsel a lot of people, though, especially guys at midlife, to first. I think it was, I forgot the minister's name who built, I think he built Temple University. Gordon Conwell, I think. He used to go around preaching this sermon to raise money. I think it was for Temple, called Acres of Diamonds. And he would just talk about this example of a diamond farmer down in Africa who sold his farm to go look for diamonds and ultimately died poor. And the person who bought his farm found that underneath that farm was the biggest diamond mine in the world. And so the point is to start looking where you stand right before you go looking for acres of diamonds. And I just see so many people think, I got to go find meaning out there. And it might be true. It might be outside your marriage and you might have to get divorced. It might be a new job, but start where you stand. Like, look at your diamond mine to see, and maybe it's empty, but maybe it's not.
Yeah, I think the good Dr. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about that. Take care of yourself and things where you are before you go out and try to seek to change the world, right? And that's true at work. You can have an impact on that culture. You can try to make a difference. You can find Dr. Dan and Rabbi B and bring them in and talk about culture and things like that. There's always possibility. But if there comes a time that you've tried and you felt you've done everything you can, maybe there is meaning to be found in a different role or a different situation. It's a difficult balance, but it truly is a balance to be had there. Work's important. To engage in work, to express our creativity, to discover meaning is important, but as is the culture in which we do it.
Yeah, the word vocation comes from the Latin vocare, which means voice. And we've turned it into a job. That's my vocation. But that's not, it might be a job. Like, that's okay too, right? I don't necessarily find it there, but it's a means to an end of allowing me to express my voice in volunteering, right? Or whatever, your voice, however you express your voice. So the job doesn't have to be the end all be all.
Right. And I think that's what we talk about when we talk about work. It's not just about where you go for 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day, a few days a week, but work can be done outside of that job, right? Creative work that expresses those values, that helps others, can be done in a variety of ways. As you said, if it's the job you go to support your family and you struggle to find meaning there, that's okay. What are you doing? What kind of work, what kind of vocation are you doing outside of that to continue to find meaning?
So I was just counseling somebody who's been in the same job for many years, and they're dialing it in. They don't feel it. And he said to me, though, I don't want to quit. Winners don't quit. I'm like, that's not true. Like, I read a book, I think it was by Seth Godin. We've talked about him before. I can't remember. It was about learning how to quit. Winners always quit, right? They quit things that distract them and take them down the wrong path. And I've been involved with enough startups to know, like, if you don't quit and you just you can't focus on one thing, then you're going to fail. So you have to learn how to quit and when to quit and why to quit. And I'm helping him become a quitter, right? I'm not putting that in the marketing literature, but it takes courage. Like, it's taking him courage to quit his job. And one of the things we're talking about, and I'd like to explore this some more, is he's doing damage by not leaving. He's doing damage to himself, his physical being, to his marriage, to the job, to the customers he's supposed to be providing for. And that's one of the things Parker Palmer talks about in his book. We do great damage, he says, when we're here unfaithfully, when we're doing jobs that aren't ours.
Right. And that goes back to logotherapy's idea that, you can choose to bring your authentic self, your true self, your indispensable self to that job. But if there becomes a point where you can't anymore, you literally can't make that choice, you're dialing it in, well, it's time to move on because you're harming others. I think that's Seth Godin's linchpin, or one of his books. He says a lot of bad ideas have to die for the good ones to come to the top, right? So you've got to try a lot of things and quit before you find the right thing, right? Whether that's, creating your own business or in different jobs. I don't think we live in a time anymore where you start a job at 22 or 24 or 18 and you stick with it for 40 or 50 years.
I'm grateful we don't live in a society anymore, which I think is a new phenomenon that doesn't hold that up as the ideal. I feel like for a period of time there was this kind of mourning period when, some of our fathers or grandfathers came out of that world, and we almost felt like we were supposed to. Actually, when I was in college, I became a business major. Why? I didn't love business. My dad was a business person. My
Mhm.
grandfather was a business person. Damn it, I was going to be a business person. Right? There was this thing. And my
Mhm.
dad looked at me and says, "Why are you studying business?" I'm like, "I thought I was supposed to." Like, what do you mean? What am I? Why I said, "He's study what you want. I don't care what you do."
Mhm.
His father didn't say that to him. Like, that was a new phenomenon for most of us.
Yeah.
So, we have to really appreciate we talk sometimes only about the negative of our society. There's some really
Mhm.
upsides right now with this changing environment.
Absolutely. A lot of benefit to go out. I think that the times in which we live in now, everybody has an opportunity to go start their own business if they want to, whether that's, you know, driving for Grubhub or Uber or Lyft or something like that. I actually had a great story of a guy who started out that way. Now he enjoyed it so much, he said, well, I'm going to make it bigger. I don't want to work for somebody else. Has his own executive limo company or something along those lines. Um, the power of the internet, you know, everybody can start a business of their own if you want to, or a side hustle, or whatever we call it. So yeah, it is. There is a huge positive there, and I think the economy's changed. I don't know about the economy, but the way business is done, the way the world works, and I guess the economy is changing. It'll be interesting to see what it looks like in the next 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, as long as you keep coming back to this idea of, I think vocation is your
Hmm.
voice
Hmm.
and not necessarily your job,
Right.
because you can express your voice by being paid, by not being paid, whether
Hmm.
you're, the working age or whether you're retirement age, right? You can find your voice and express it. And that's really at the heart of logotherapy and the
Hmm.
work we do, that you have a voice, an authentic you, a divine spark, as Dr. Frankl called it before. You must express it. That's
Hmm.
what you're here to do,
Hmm.
but you must do it somehow,
And
some way.
and if you don't, it will hurt you. It will cause you to wither. It will make you feel the existential void of anxiety and depression and all these other things. So there's a part from Doctrine of the Soul about work environment. I think it's about work environment that I wanted to share. I've always enjoyed this one, right? He talks about people's natural relationship to their employment as the area for possible actualization of creative values and self-fulfillment often is distorted by prevailing conditions at work. There are, for example, those who complain that they work 8 or more hours a day for an employer and in that employer's interest alone, doing nothing but an indeterminable columns of figures, right? So if you find your labor meaningless, you have the opportunity. I love that idea. Like literally, you can share your voice, just like we're doing right now, right here. Go start a podcast, right? If your job you find you can't bring your authentic self, if it does feel meaningless that you're slaving for somebody else, but you love fly fishing, well, I don't know a darn thing about fly fishing, but I've been pretty interested in it, and I would love to hear a podcast on it, or a YouTube channel, or I don't know. Have you ever watched anybody tie a fly for fly fishing? It is,
Sounds riveting.
you know what? I don't know how I accidentally fell upon this, but it did take my attention for a good couple minutes. It is fascinating. Um,
I
but the,
watch I've seen tons of TV shows where they're fly fishing, and I've been out in the woods, seen people fly fishing. I've never seen anybody catch a damn fish that way. Can you actually catch fish, or are they just like enjoying the process?
I cannot catch fish. I've never. My dad was a great fisher. He loved fishing. Would get me up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go fishing. Never caught a fish in my life. I hated it. I was the motor that made the canoe go. I enjoyed that. I hated fishing. But I tell you what, and B, you're out there in Colorado, right? I mean, beautiful, gorgeous streams along every roadside, right? Like, just an opportunity to pop out, pull over, hop out of your car, grab your fly rod, and throw it in a beautiful, pristine creek. And I see people doing that when I've been out to Colorado, and I thought I might give it a try. It was a terrible idea. Not a fly fisherman, but it looks so cool.
I don't know. You look like you'd be pretty good with one of those hats and the camo
Right,
jacket and
right.
everything. Yeah.
B, with a haircut like mine, I'm good with any hat on because I have to have a lot of hats.
Plus, you got fair skin. You burn. I don't burn. So, uh, yes. And so, coming back from fly fishing, I'm trying to reel it back
What a
in.
great vocation, fly fishing, right? That's it. I mean, we live in a time where if you have an interest, even if it's not your job, you can make it a vocation. You can share on YouTube. You can make TikToks, Instagram, what social media things.
And that's a great, great point. That's one of the beauties and benefits of living in the year 2022 is we have you have the ability to write a book and publish it at a
Hmm.
my mom I gave her as a gift you write your story, Storyworth. You heard of Storyworth?
Mm.
It's a great website.
Mhm.
I bought it for a few people, especially, who are in retirement, re-inspirement era. They send you an email every week, and I put in the questions, and it's about her life, and she writes about it. And at the end, we gather them together, and we publish on the site a book for everybody in her family. And it has been remarkable to watch how she has really come alive in the process of storytelling. When she thinks she's doing it for everybody else, and she is, it's a gift to us. It's a gift to her, because you can see the work is working its magic through her. There's power in that.
That's beautiful. You said that Storyworth. I will certainly check that out.
Storyworth.
And that is, we talk about developmental psychology. That is the phase of life she is in. She should be doing that, should be sharing that story and that history, and making sure people understand, her trials and mistakes and errors, and also her successes in life, so that she can pass those on. What a beautiful opportunity and situation.
And that's why, if somebody's bored, they're just not thinking creatively and expansively enough. If you don't have a day job, so what? That can be a job, to tell your story.
Yep.
What a worthy effort and time well spent, to give that to your children, your children's children. And I know I've written a couple of books. It's a full-time job to write a book. Right?
Oh,
That
absolutely.
could be your vocation right now.
Yeah. Whatever it is, I think everybody has a book or three in them, right? I mean, the idea is just your life, what you've lived, what you've experienced, to be able to pass that on. So, and if you're not, right, that you use the word bored. And I remember as a child feeling bored, surrounded by books and toys, and like, just how are we ever possibly bored? There's always some kind of meaningful work to be done. And that is one of the things Dr. Frankl talks about in the Doctor and the Soul, in many of his books, but in the Doctor and the Soul, this idea of the existential vacuum. If you're not working, the unemployment neurosis, I believe he called it, was for those, if you don't have something meaningful, productive, if you don't feel like you're contributing to society, that neurosis can be paralyzing.
Yeah. Totally. And, I guess continuing along those lines, I've been doing a lot of work around the Enneagram, as our audience knows. And I've worked a lot with Enneagram 2s. They're called the helper. They're the typical nurturing kind of contributor. And they've reminded me of the power of contribution. They're just so natural at what I would have, as an 8, called second fiddle. Right? Because, in the symphony, there's first violin and the second violin, and first violin is like the place to be. But first violin can't be first violin without second violin, without second fiddle. But to them, it's not second fiddle, which is used as a negative.
Right.
It's a supporting role.
Right.
They're best supporting actors and actresses. Somebody needs to play that part and win that academy.
Right.
Because without it, you're not going to have a movie if everybody's playing lead actor.
Right.
And so I think, part of the conversation is we all have a supporting role to play.
Yep.
That's part of the work too. Can we see that as our essential work, and not as just something we do to support somebody else, but as part of our contribution?
Absolutely. The great moral messages of soccer coach Ted Lasso would not be as great without his second fiddle, Roy Kent, to illustrate those things. If you haven't seen that yet, you got to watch you some Ted Lasso.
I'm going to watch it.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. Being of support to somebody else is truly self-transcendent work, right? You are helping them carry out that mission. You are elevating their situation. As Dr. Frankl says, we can see farther on the shoulders of giants. And sometimes that requires us to, step back and realize that we don't have to be first or number one. We don't always have to be the CEO. Sometimes just doing the work and recognizing who you support can be very meaningful.
So there's a great story about Senator Bill Bradley, who was out at a restaurant, fancy power meeting, and he's being served by the waiter, and he gets a roll, and he gets a pat of butter. And the waiter only gives him one pat of butter. He says, "I'd like 2." And he's like, "Well, we have a policy, only 1 pat of butter here." He says, "Do you know who I am? I'm Senator Bill Bradley. I was a professional basketball player. I'm on the head of the arms committee. He said, "And who are you?" And the waiter looks at him and says, "I'm the guy with the butter. You're not getting a second pad." And
It's great.
I just always like that, like we all have our power. our strength, and it can be as much little or as much as handing out the butter, right? But
Yeah.
everybody's got that job, and like, can you own that? Can you, whatever you're doing, can you just own it? And that's, to me, the Frankel piece.
Hmm.
Can you go in and find the sparks of meaning in whatever job you're doing and raise it up?
Yep. It is recognizing your unique and indispensable ability to contribute in that realm. You are there for a reason. Find that reason, and as you said, elevate it and do the best job you can at it. And in doing that, you elevate those around you. You discover meaning, um, and that's what we're, part of why we're here. The other side of that, and I love this phrase, and I think we encounter this far too often, is what Dr. Frankl calls the Sunday neurosis, right? So we talked about the unemployment neurosis. I think neurosis was just their term back then for anything that doesn't feel right. But the Sunday neurosis is that feeling around 4 p.m. to maybe 9 p.m. on Sunday nights when people start to think about, oh no, I'm going back. I have to, back to that schedule Monday morning. I have to be up at 6 and out the door at 7 and in the office by 8. And I have to do the stuff and push the button and make the things. And if you feel yourself, if you experience this Sunday neurosis, you got to make a change. Because we're going back to the idea of harming. You're no fun to your family or whoever you're around during that time on Sunday, but it's not good for you either.
I think there actually are statistics on suicide rates going up on Mondays. And it's not surprising based on this idea of the Sunday neurosis, because if you feel like your, contribution or your work is meaningless, then come Monday when you have to return to it, I can just imagine that I know that feeling of dread. I've been in that job. I've had those moments, and I know that is no way to live. So
Absolutely.
either you change your circumstances or you change your attitude. That's a Frankel statement
Yeah.
right there.
Yep. I mean, that's just a truism, right? Yeah, Dr. Frankel may have said, but that's just fact. You've got to make a change. If you're experiencing that on a Sunday, all week long, figure it out. Do something different, right? And maybe that's finding a more meaningful hobby that your work supports, so that it's not just a Saturday weekend warrior hobby that you only get to do once a day. Going back to that idea of mixing in life and work and not waiting for retirement. Well, you can't wait for the weekend to live your life either, right?
Mm.
You've got to do those enjoyable things that work supports. And then if your work is not it's not bringing you meaning, you're not discovering meaning in it. You either got to change your attitude and find opportunity for meaning, or change your job and find something that's more important to you.
Well, and that comes to a fundamental word and idea in logotherapy, and that's responsibility. You must
Hmm.
take responsibility for that. And I just had this conversation with a client who's 60 years old, and they wanted to do something, and they basically said they don't have enough time. It's too late for them. And that's irresponsible. You must take responsibility. The fact that you are 60, you still are above ground, you still are breathing, you still have time. Will you finish it? I don't know, but you have the responsibility to yourself, like to engage it, to try it, and not use. It's irresponsible to use circumstances. I'm just too old.
Yeah.
That's too easy. You got to do it because you're telling yourself you got to do it.
Yeah. If there
Real
are
quick,
people out there, go ahead.
here's just a quote by Frankel from Doctrine of the Soul. The heroic life of one who has died young certainly has more content and meaning than the existence of some long-lived dullard. Sometimes the unfinished, quote unquote, are among the most beautiful symphonies. And so you're not going to complete the symphony, right? But something about that is profound yet.
Right. And I would be genuinely curious, what task at 60 are you not able to complete? What would possibly take 10 or 20 or 30 years? And like you said, even if you feel you can't complete it, start it and see where it goes. If there are 80 and 90-year-olds out there training and running marathons and they can complete that, surely at 60 there's nothing beyond your ability to complete if you really want to, if you take responsibility and find the means to do it.
And if you really want to, somebody came to Earl Nightingale and said, they were talking. He said, I really wish I knew how to play the violin. And he says, how old are you? She says, 60. He's like, you don't really wish you would want to. It's like, what do you mean I don't? So how long have you wanted to? 20 years. In the past 20 years, if you really wanted to, you could have learned every instrument in the orchestra, but you don't really want to. And that's okay. So just say that. I don't really want, I like the idea of learning how to play the violin. I don't really want it. But if you do really want it, then you owe it to yourself to go do it.
Yep.
Right? Just do it.
I think that idea of owning it, right? If you say you want to do something, go do it. But on the other hand, if you're just saying it and you really aren't that invested in it, own that. It's okay. Don't go around telling people that there's a guitar sitting right behind this computer there that I've had there for 2 years. I don't think it's been out of the case in the past year. I thought I wanted to learn the guitar. I did some strumming. I don't whatever that. I put my fingers on the chords there for a little while, and it made some beautiful noise, and then that was it. And then I had to own it. Like, yeah, I probably don't want to do this.
I didn't have time, right? You had time. You chose to do other things, no problem.
Right.
But don't give
didn't
me
make time.
You had time. You had an hour a day to watch TV, 5 hours a week on an average. If we're doing 10 hours a week on average, do the math. You had time, and that's fine. But that's where I work with myself too. I hold myself accountable, and it's not always so easy. And working with other people, take responsibility and just tell the truth. Because if you don't, you become a victim of your circumstances, and it just spills out everywhere.
Yes,
so own it. Just own it.
Not just a victim of your circumstances, but a victim of yourself. And that's sad to witness, right? Nobody has to be a victim to their self. You can make the choice to tell yourself, I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn it. I'm going to knock it out. There's so many videos on YouTube these days. You can learn to do just about anything.
It's true. It's interesting. Have you ever read anything by Edith Eger, Eger?
I can't recall right now. I know. I think you've talked about her before.
She wrote the book, The Choice, and another one, The Gift. She was in the Holocaust. She was a student of Frankel's. She became a logotherapist. Anyways, she has the best definition for the victim. The victim says, and we're all victims at times, so, but we don't have to remain there. She says, the victim says, why me? And a survivor says, now what? Right? Why me is an unanswerable question, and survivor says, now what? Now what do I do? Well, I haven't learned how to play the guitar, and I'm going to figure it out. So now what? Now I got to pick up the guitar.
Yeah. And if we take that into the work world, right? The victim says, this place is terrible. It's not good for me. Why me? Why me? And the survivor, the thriver says, now what? What can I learn? Who can I help? How do I grow? If the culture is toxic, how do I help change the culture? Where can I invest in this? And that's somebody that's going to, have an impact and make changes.
Makes sense. Well, I think right now we're at about the time where your friend is about done jogging. So
that is true. I'm not sure he's running much these days. I mean, we're about 45 minutes, so hopefully he's getting a good 4 or 5 miles in, but knowing him, it might only be 2. He's not that fast.
Well, at either rate, I think we probably want to end before our audience does.
Right. Absolutely. As always, you can find me at danielafranz.com, DANIELAFRANZ.com. B, where can we find out more about you and the Enneagram project you're working on?
Simplifying my life, keeping it simple, defiantspirit.org. Learn all you wanted to know about me, and probably way more than you wanted. And I would love to hear from you. So shoot me an email, and love to hear from you about this podcast. So if you've stuck with us to the end, we got to give them our little trivial question. What are we going to ask them?
Here's what we're going to ask him. You know what? I've learned something here, B. As I was studying, I talked a bit about Hari's stolen focus and algorithms and all of that silliness that goes into the internet. Hey, if you're out there listening to our podcast, either one, the Meaning Project or the Defiant Spirit, do us a favor, whether it's a thumbs up or a like or a comment or a review or a share. Apparently, by doing these things, you help other people find these podcasts and grow in meaning. So help us help more people, help us, right? Be our support here, as we were talking about. Help us do some transcendent work. And I don't know, B, what's the lingo? Like, share, comments.
Yeah, leave us a 5-star review. You got to be specific, or else we're going to get a 1-star. No
1 star.
I got enough negative reviews at home. I don't need any more out in the world.
So do us a big favor. I know a lot of you out there, share with us and correspond with B and I. Leave us a review. Give us, hopefully, if it's a 5-star. If it's a 1-star, you totally should be getting a hold of us and saying, "Look, you guys are terrible. Do something better."
And we would love to cross-pollinate audiences. So I would love my peeps, whoever's following Defiant Spirit, to jump over and join the Meaning Project. And I'm sure Dr. Dan would welcome the other direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All
Until
right.
next
What's our random Dr. D and Rabbi B trivia of today?
Oh man, I brought it up and I can't even think of it.
Yeah. I got it. What is the work? We talked about work today. What is the work you really want to be doing? And if you feel blessed and fortunate to be doing the work that you should be doing, that you want to be doing, that you find meaningful, tell us that too. But I'm gonna warn you. If you tell us there's something you should be doing and you're not doing it, what do you think we're gonna have to say, B?
Gonna have to make them take responsibility.
Responsibility.
All
All right,
right.
brother. Always a pleasure chatting with you. I hope I don't know, I have so much fun doing this. I hope other people are benefiting from it. I would do this even if we didn't have listeners, but the fact that we get to help other people makes it even cooler.
It's meaningful to us, so we'll just keep doing it one way or the other.
Absolutely.
All right, brother. Take care.
Take care.